Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Flag, here we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right. Another week, and the offseason continues as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 233. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with two of my best friends in the business, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, Josh Norris from Roto World NBC Sports. Just a fun, casual conversation about how they started in the player evaluation business, how we use analytics when projecting college players to the NFL, and then everyone's favorite, how we go about making player comparisons from college to the NFL. Honestly, this conversation is very similar to the conversations that Dane, Josh, and I have whenever we see each other at the Combine or at the Senior Bowl, at the Shrine Bowl. So being able to do it with some mics in our faces this past week was a lot of fun. So hope you guys enjoy it. We're going to get right to the top here. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Really excited to welcome back to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, my friend Dane Brugler from The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. Dane, welcome back to the show, man.
Oh, thanks.
I think you've been on the show before. I know you've been on Journey to the Draft a bunch of times.
For sure.
But I want to talk about player evaluation process. I want to first get into your background, your history. How did you first get into the business of player evaluation?
I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I'm a Cleveland guy, and when the Browns came back in '99, I was just enamored with, why Tim Couch, or why Donovan McNabb, or why Ricky Williams, and that whole process just was fascinating to me. And so it became a hobby, and then it became a kind of an obsession, and I really didn't think I could do anything else with my life besides scout football and figure it out. And so, if you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. If you want to be a scout, what the heck do you do?
Right.
So I figured out how to kind of carve my own way, and that included, going to Mount Union, Division III powerhouse. And my senior year, I worked for the football team, and we also had another senior there by the name of Pierre Garcon. And we had scouts coming through every week, coming through Alliance, Ohio, and it was my responsibility to take those scouts around to the practice and the facility and things like that. And that's what really kind of got me started. And I was doing stuff on my own besides that. But that kind of started my networking and my informal education. C.O. Bricado, legendary scout, he was really one of my biggest mentors in terms of teaching me the business, showing me the ropes, teaching me how to scout, the traits that you're looking for, things like that. And just it's evolved over the years. And so it's such a fascinating process, and something that it doesn't matter where you are as a scout, there's always more to learn. It's a constantly evolving thing.
No question.
And so it's something that that trying to figure out position by position, the traits you're looking for. It's an ongoing battle. How to use the data. There's so much information out there, and just trying to figure out how to best use it. And then just when you think you have it figured out, or not figured out but close to figuring it out, you're headed in the right direction, there's an outlier, or there's something that changes the way you're thinking. And so it's just a fascinating process, and I'm blessed to be able to say I can do it for my career.
Sure. It's funny you brought up that draft, because that was really the draft for me that got me hooked too, because that was a huge debate. Browns were picking one,
right?
Eagles were picking two,
right? That's
and
a good point.
It was a huge debate.
Andy Reid's first season.
Yep, it was Andy's first draft, and it was Donovan McNabb versus Ricky Williams, and that was all sports talk radio back then. Was every headline was Ricky versus Donovan. Who should it be? Who would it be? And that was what really kind of got me in tune with the NFL draft. And
that's funny.
From that point on, I was kind of hooked as well. You brought up an interesting point about the data that's available now. We didn't have this data from all these sources available 3-4 years ago. You and I were still we're in the business. We didn't have this stuff available to us. How do you use that data at this point? Is it tough to bring it in because you didn't have it historically, so you don't have context to it? How do you try and incorporate it?
That is such a loaded question because there's so many different ways you can, and here at the Combine, obviously you have your the 40-yard dash and the 3-cone and some of these more traditional drills, but it's a very evolving process, and we're seeing this year it's going to be in prime time, and some of the drills are going to be timed, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works. It's hard to tell how many of these drills are made for TV, how many of these drills are made for the betterment of teams to do their job. That's a really interesting part of this too, is trying to figure it out. So all I know is it's constantly evolving, and it's something that I think we're trying to figure out. Because like I said, just when you think you're headed in the right direction, there's an outlier, or there's something that Devin Singletary last year. I remember sitting here. Right here at this table with you, we both gushed over Devin Singletary. Then he goes out and runs in the mid-4.6s. And
it's off everybody.
It wasn't just a 40-yard, it was the 3-cone, the shuttles. And, it's just like, okay, what are we missing? Because he looks like Shady McCoy on tape.
Right.
And then he goes out and has a productive rookie year. So it's something that I think Josh Norris could probably provide some context to.
I was just going to say, you said that the process is constantly evolving. This podcast episode is constantly evolving as we welcome in another one of our good friends, Josh Norris from Roto World and NBC Sports. Josh, we're talking through the use of data in the pre-draft process and how a lot of the sources that we get, the places that we get this data from, we didn't necessarily have it a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, and now we're starting to see more of an influx for it for us in the media. How do you incorporate that into your process?
First of all, I would do anything for you two, and that's including running across this convention center just to get here after another guest on my own podcast to not show up
So
because
you're
he had no
paying for dinner
credential.
tonight?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I think Devin Singletary is an interesting name that you brought up because I think now with athletic testing, it's become very binary in that either people believe you have to use it for everything or use it for nothing.
Right.
And there's something in the middle. And I don't think it applies equally to every single position. For running back, I don't think it applies at all. Now, I'm going to say that with a caveat is I don't think it applies at all to top-ranked players that we see when we evaluate them. Dalvin Cook is an example. David Montgomery went quite early. Devin Singletary was another name. Josh Jacobs did not even test that well.
But you can help unearth some gems for you, too.
Exactly.
Or eliminate some people later on.
It is the perfect type of information when you get into round 6, round 7, undrafted free agents. Mike Boone, Raheem Mostert, Matt Breida. These are all players that I would much rather take dart throws on as undrafted free agents rather than, again, those bad athletes in that same territory.
Interesting. Yeah, to me, I always struggle personally with I didn't have this data a couple years ago. I don't have the historical context. I can go back and look at how I evaluated and graded a player in 2012 and 2014 and 2015 before I had anything but just these combine numbers. And so even going back, the Spark data goes back a certain point, but not as far back as we would like. To me, trying to incorporate all that stuff into my own process has been a fun part.
But don't you think it's important for specific positions, Dane? Because running back is, I just mentioned, but I highly value it with edge rushers and offensive tackles, interior defensive linemen, because when you look at a football field, it's obviously 11-on-11, and there are very few true one-on-one matchups. But I can say, 75% of the time, your edge rusher is going to go against this offensive tackle, and who wins? In a perfect world, wouldn't it be better to have an athletic leg up in that standpoint? Like in its simplest form, just having that athletic advantage, I think does matter. And then coupling it with maybe you rank 3 or 4 players with round 1 grades among edge rushers, but one is, this 30th percentile athlete, 2 of them are 85th percentile athletes. Wouldn't you just feel better taking the better athlete in that dynamic? And I think that's just an easy way for how all this athletic testing can be applied.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But I think especially what you said about different positions, because it really does matter. Certain positions are more stopwatch positions than others. Corner, wide receiver, the long speed, that certainly matters. But it's tough because there are definitely outliers, and I think going into the combine, it's important, at least from my perspective, it's important to have an idea of how they play on the field, how they perform athletically. And I think there's the old 90-10 rule, where 90% of the results this week at the combine should confirm what you thought going in.
Yep.
But there's going to be 10% that is not what you thought. And what do you do with that 10%? You don't just ignore it. You don't just take it on its face value. You have to try and figure out what's going on. And it's one thing if it's a running back, like Devin Singletary last year. It's another if it's a corner or guys that just play better, play faster. And so it can be tough just to trust the numbers, but it's factual, quantitative data.
I kind of disagree, and this is great. Like, you and I are friends. We're friends too, Dane and Fran. Like, this is something where I think my eyes lie to me. I don't completely.
They can,
of course.
Trust my eyes in every avenue to completely discern. Well, this guy's a good athlete. This one's not. I, in many cases, would much rather trust numbers because these athletes have been training, most likely, hopefully, for this moment. But then also incorporate, well, if they had a bad test here, they also have their pro day to make up for it. Because at pro days, it's an easier environment. They don't have to get up so early. And so we shouldn't just dismiss those. But again, I just want to reiterate that I'm not saying that what I've seen heading into this event does not matter at all. It absolutely does. But I'm also of the belief that I can be absolutely wrong, and this is a way to correct that.
Yeah. I agree with the idea of being able to trust the numbers. I know that there's just so many factors that can come into a play when a guy does not test. He might test 0.2 of a second different because of factor A, B, C, D, E. He didn't train great and his start wasn't great, but man, his top end speed on film is outstanding. And you saw it in the from 20 to 40 yards, but man, he lost 0.2 because of his 10-yard split. So to me, it is easier to trust the numbers, but I can't get all the way in because I have an understanding of, I feel like I have an understanding anyway of how it could go awry.
If it was up to you, Josh, I think you would have the combine be kind of the first step of the scouting process. So you understand from the right away what type of athlete they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will not post any rankings now until after the combine from now on. And there's a lot of...
Have you looked at any of these players?
Oh, yes.
So you have
I'm about 70 in right now.
So you have some preconceived understanding of who they are.
For sure. And I'm super behind in compared to previous years. Previous years I would go to the Shrine Game, the Senior Bowl, and have those guys watched. I think that there are a lot of factors that can go into a bad workout. But someone who always will point to this is Levante David. I thought Levante David played fairly fast on field, and he did. And then I go and watch someone like Phil Dawson. No, Paul Dawson, the linebacker from TCU.
You loved Paul Dawson.
I thought Paul Dawson played fast, and I thought he was a very similar player
Didn't he
to Levante
not break
David.
5? Didn't he break 504?
He has one of the worst combines you've seen, and still gets drafted fairly highly because I'm sure the NFL had similar evaluations prior to the combine.
He's also terrible off the field.
That I did. He had that, and I think that being off the field and not preparing probably set him up for failure here. Ja'Kai Polite was this easy example that we can bring up from last season as well. But no, I would love just to have more information before I put my name to anything. And so waiting for me to post rankings after an event like this matters a lot.
So I want to flip this conversation on its head a little bit. I'm going to take a completely different direction. How do you guys feel and how do you guys utilize player comparisons when you're doing your evaluations? Are you completely anti-player or player comparison? Do you tier it? Do you put one name to one name? How do you guys utilize
a spectrum?
It? Yeah.
I don't force it. Sometimes it's natural, and sometimes it's not. And if it's not, then I'm not gonna when I write about players. If there's one that just really stands out and this
just
guy
pounds you over the head.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna include it and talk about it and say he reminds me of this. And sometimes, and there's different comparisons. Sometimes guys remind you of a player, stylistically, or just their skill set, or certain parts. And sometimes it's just one trait. Sometimes a running back, I think he's got this guy's vision, or but he doesn't have everything else. And so, I don't like the player comparison name.
Right.
It requires so much context. It's never.
There's so much nuance needed for that.
Exactly. There's so rarely apples to apples. This guy is this guy. This guy is this guy. And it's if I did comparisons, if I had to do them, I would do them with, as long as I can include a paragraph and explain exactly what I'm thinking, then I'd be okay doing comparisons. They're just not always natural. They don't always come cleanly, and then you hate to force them. But at the same time, there is it can be helpful because it can help create an idea of who that player is going to be, and help give people that maybe haven't seen him, idea of who that player can be at the next level.
All three of us do content in like different ways for what we're asked to do, and like to me, like if I don't have to post like my notes on guys and my projections on guys. If I had the ability to do that, or if I was asked to do that, I should say, I would do different levels of player comparison with like body type X, okay, athletic profile.
Right.
You look at those spider charts and everything. There's a comparison. Film study. This is what this is a guy how he reminds me of. Utilization. Hey, he could be used like this. This guy.
Fran, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it can be a lot of work.
I think for me,
Probably too much work.
Player comparisons are fun.
Yes.
First of all,
yeah. People love them.
Yeah.
Our text
Fans love
chains know that. Like, I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, I was watching G.J. Kinney.
Right.
Okay, and
Offensive coordinator Hawaii now.
I was like,
That's
who does he remind me of playing this position? And I might have texted you, and we got to it. Aesthetically, it's Jeff Garcia.
Right.
Like they played very similarly, and so much of it is aesthetic to me. And no player comparison is perfect, and people take them way too literally. Like if in this draft class I compared a wide receiver to Chris Godwin, that means at least to me that it's this big wide receiver who's super athletic, who can go up and dominate and be one of the best in this class at winning in contested situations.
Yeah.
But someone out there who reads or listens to our work might say, okay, that also means he's going to go in the third round, but have a really good third year in the NFL
Right.
and have a breakout. And it's never perfect. But what I always go back to is one, aesthetic, but two, utilization and how they win in the field. It all goes back to how they win and how and what strengths they offer. And if they're an inch separate, who cares? If they're 20 pounds difference, that can matter. But more aesthetically and how they win in the field is always how I go back to comparisons.
So we started this conversation, Dane, with getting your entrance into covering the NFL draft and player evaluation. We're going to wrap it up. Josh, I want to hear how you got into the player evaluation business.
Well, it all started in 1995, and the Carolina Panthers came to Charlotte.
Yep.
You fast forward a few
Were you
years.
2 years old? 3 years old?
I was 7, sir.
Oh, I keep forgetting.
I was 7. I'm glad you think I'm younger than I am. No, honestly, I've just always been obsessed with football.
Yep.
I'm sure maybe you can all agree with this, that, I have a brother, and
We can all agree with that, yeah.
he is a lawyer, and I'm sure my parents sat up at night when I grew up and, knew what he was going to do, but sat up at night and be like, Josh just likes football, and what is he going to do with his life?
He's going to run the 40-yard dash. And,
That's true. That is
He'll live in the
regrettably
internet
true. No, I was lucky enough to go to a school named Elon University.
Yeah.
I got an internship with the Rams scouting department during my...
How did that happen?
So the GM of the Rams at the time,
Billy Devaney, right?
was an Elon graduate. And he opened it up.
Got
It was
it.
like one of those Truman Show moments where I already had an internship in LA with Fox Sports Radio. But then the day after the end of classes, I get this email saying only open to an Elon student, NFL scouting department with St. Louis Rams internship. I was like, this was made for me.
Yeah.
But that was a great experience. That was the year that it was Sam Bradford's rookie year. Jason Smith in his second year. Remember that name?
Right,
Jason
sure.
Smith. They already
Baylor.
knew he wasn't going to be a left
Yep.
tackle, so they drafted Roger Saffold in the second round.
Who also turned into not a left
Nope.
tackle? Nope.
And then they invited me back for the 2011 NFL draft. So I was in the draft room with them for all 7 rounds of that. And
How was that?
That was Robert Quinn.
You're the only one of us that's been in a draft room.
Really?
It's true.
That was my job was to move the magnets from the front board to the back board.
Right.
That was also the lockout year.
Yes.
That's right. That was Cam Newton.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was no free agency ahead
Yep.
of the draft.
Yep.
All those quarterbacks went quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It also put into perspective to me of one, who makes the decisions. I know every team is different, but how it's really head coach, GM, because coaches would come in, there'd be discussions about 5 or 6 picks to go until they're up on the clock.
Did they have
But
the scouts
then-
in the room too?
Yes.
Okay.
The scouts were always in the room. The coaches were in the room next door. But then, they slowly trickle in the closer you get to
Sure.
the pick. But then, with 1 or 2 picks to go, it was Steve Spagnuolo and Billy Devaney would, huddle in a corner and just have their own conversation. So if you remember that draft class of the Rams, it was Robert Quinn in round 1. They had no clue they were going to get Robert Quinn. Actually, it was probably going to be between Corey Liuget and Prince Amukamara.
Okay.
But then, as you go on, they drafted Austin Pettis. They
Right,
drafted
Boise State.
Boise State, yeah.
Great special teamer.
Greg Salas.
Hawaii, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Both on day 2, right? Or
yeah.
what it used to be. Day
So,
2.
and they were
Or is
actually,
now day 2.
well, no, then the second round pick was Lance Kendricks because
Wisconsin.
Josh
Yeah.
McDaniels had just joined as the offensive coordinator. And he had come from the Patriots where they had Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. No, excuse me, he came from Denver, but,
Sure, yeah.
2 tight end sets. And they thought Lance Kendricks was going to be their receiving tight end.
I liked him, yeah.
Opposite of Michael Ho-Ho Manawanui. That didn't turn out well.
Who, man?
But it was also a jolt of information that Lance Kendricks wasn't even close to the top of the board in the second round. And when Billy said, hey, we're going to draft him, the director of college scouting just laughed at him. He's like, you're just going against all of our grades.
Where was he
right now?
Do you remember where?
I think he was 20 grades down.
Okay.
So probably still a second round pick. Actually, that morning, we all woke up and watched Lance Kendricks tape and DJ Williams tape, Arkansas tight end.
Wow, yeah.
Because they were going to take one of those to be their receiving time. People thought round 3 or round 4, but it ended up being in round 2. I'm rambling here. There's more stories, but I was also amazed at how little process they had in their third day selections. They got around to round 5, round 6, round 7, and it was just throwing darts. It was like, hey, we haven't picked anyone from your area. Who do you want to take on the board? And that's just awful process.
Well, that's what a lot of scouts you'll talk to will say, look, the day 1, day 2, that's the GM, head coach, who are the decision makers. You get to day 3 and undrafted free agents, those are our guys. That's who we have the most pride in, and we kind of help most.
And I loved what the Ravens did when it was Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta, because Newsome would take the first 2 days, and then to prepare for his full-time general manager role, DeCosta, because I believe there was one year where the Ravens had 3 fourth-round picks or 4 fourth-round picks.
Yes.
And that was his draft, was to determine hits that they could get in round 4 and round 5 on day 3.
Was that the Kenneth Dixon year? And Willie Henry from Michigan.
Yep.
And
Tavon Young, maybe?
Yeah, Tavon Young was in that group. Yep.
So I think that's really cool. And I would love to see that be implemented more across the NFL because having process when you get to day 3, maybe including athletic testing to bring this full circle more often, to rely on scouts who you believe can find those gems that other people, because we all love many of the same prospects.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool to see that used across the NFL.
So we went about 20-ish minutes. We probably could go for another 2 hours, but Dane's got somewhere to be. You've got whoever you've got to interview across the way here in the media center. Appreciate the time for both of you guys here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
Great stuff from both Dane and Josh, and you can follow them just like I do on Twitter at DP Brugler and at Josh Norris. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. You know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the best way is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen. Give us a rating, leave us a comment. Wanted to give a shout out to someone who did just that. At Write Him, left a 5-star review saying how much he loved the episode with the Combine trainers and left a review just to talk about that specific episode. So Write Him. We'll really hope you enjoyed that one. Really glad to hear from you. Excited to continue to produce more shows just like that. Give you guys a peek behind the scenes as to what goes on throughout the course of the NFL calendar year. So hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Hope you enjoyed hearing from the Combine or from the strength coaches the year after that or the week after that. Greg Cosell last week. Josh and Dane brought the juice this week. So we've done a lot over the last few weeks, and we've got a lot of really fun interviews over the next few weeks as well. So we're just getting started here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. So Wilt brought up that combine performance and those numbers and the training that goes into that, and another big step in that process already started, and that's the pro day circuit. So all the colleges, they're all going to, with NFL prospects, they're all going to run basically their own mini NFL combine on each of their campuses. And it's a little bit different. As Josh mentioned earlier in the show, the circumstances are a little bit different. The workouts are a little bit more scripted. They don't have to get up as early in the morning, so it's not, there's not as much adversity for each of these players. The times are usually a little bit better, but I think it's important to note that some people might stick their nose up to pro day times, but Pro day times absolutely matter, and NFL teams, they're going to take all those times a little bit differently. Some teams will use the best number throughout the process no matter what. So if a guy runs a 4.6 at the combine and he runs a 4.4 at the pro day, well, it's going to show 4.4 in their database. It's going to show 4.4 on his draft card. Some teams might take the average and say, all right, well, if he ran 4.6 in Indy and he ran 4.4 at his pro day, he's going to be a 4.5 guy for us. And so every team is going to kind of treat that a little bit differently. Most teams are going to take the best number, especially or even the most recent number. And I think that's where you're really going to start to see some of these guys put some better numbers up. I would expect, honestly, this pro day circuit, there to be a lot more improved numbers in comparison to years past, because I feel like a lot of these guys with the new combine schedule, not everybody was kind of up to speed in terms of getting their bodies right for running late in the day or late into the night in some cases. So I would expect a lot of those times to look a little bit better, especially in the 40-yard dash and the jumps. We're going to see a lot more shuttles because a lot of players honestly chose not to even do the shuttle, the 3-cone and the short shuttle drill out in Indianapolis. So we'll see some updated times for those guys throughout the course of this pro day circuit. But certainly a fun time gearing up towards the NFL draft. We've got free agency, though, right on the horizon. So we'll be here. We'll be breaking it all down. Everything that happens here in Philadelphia, we'll be breaking that down over the course of the next few weeks when it comes to free agency. Really appreciate the job that Dane Brugler and Josh Norris did at the top of the show. Appreciate all of you for listening as well, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, Google Play, everywhere that you can listen. Spotify. We're on Spotify now. Tune in. So wherever you listen, really, really appreciate it. Again, just one more time, go on, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. I hope you guys are already subscribed to the Journey to the Draft podcast driven by AAA as well. We've got weekly episodes coming your way every single week leading up to the NFL draft as well. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade for everybody here at the NovaCare Complex. I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.